Hello everyone, I'm Paris Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership with Tom Fox, hosted by Richard Lummis.
Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 86 of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership. Richard Lummis is on assignment this week. Today I have a very interesting guest for you. I have Gini Dietrich of Gini Dietrich, and Gini talks about the 6 habits that lead you to becoming a strategic thinker. Gini is a independent businesswoman, and like many of us, she was very good at what she did, which was in the PR field, and struck out on her own. And one of the things she had to learn to do was begin to think strategically instead of just tactically. This has been a challenge for me over the years, and I think it challenges many people who are very good as subject matter experts, but yet when they move to business leadership or business ownership roles, they have to learn to think strategically. She gives us 6 points that you can incorporate into your leadership toolkit, which will help you to learn to think strategically. I know you will find it interesting. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening. Richard Lummis and I will be back together with you next week. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode, and today you are in for a real treat because I have Gini Dietrich, founder at Gini Dietrich, and also the founder of SpinSucks. And she wrote a fascinating blog post entitled The 6 Habits That Lead to Being a Strategic Thinker in PR. And after having read this, I realized that it is a much broader and wider applicability to anyone who's trying to learn how to think strategically rather than tactically. So, Gini, with that long-winded introduction, welcome and thank you for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you. I love hanging out with you, Tom.
So, Gini, why is it difficult for people who are very good in their profession tactically to move to thinking strategically?
I think it's a couple of things. Number one, we tend to not really define strategy, and it means different things to different people. And so when people say you need to think strategically, we kind of go, what does that mean? And how do I do that? And it's like anything else. If you can teach it, then you really understand it, but not very many people can teach it, which means not very many people understand it. I also think that it's men tend to be better strategic thinkers than women. And with 50% of the professional audience, as women, I think that we tend to be multitaskers and take on a lot of things, which makes us tactically driven by nature. And so we really have to understand what strategy means and how we can implement it into our lives.
So one of the things that really struck me about your article is it seemed to target multiple audiences, but the 2 I identified are the ones that struck home with me were the audience of the business owner and the audience of the service provider. So You're both a business owner and you're a service provider, and you're required to think strategically for not only your business, but also your customers. Would that be a fair assessment?
It is a fair assessment. And absolutely. You have to think strategically to grow your business, but also to really understand how to help your clients' businesses grow too. So for service providers, it's definitely a must needed thing. It's talent, skill.
So you cited to a fellow named Paul Shoemaker in his breakdown of 6 habits of true strategic thinkers. And I was wondering if you could just walk us through, starting with anticipate.
So anticipate is the first one. And really what we're talking about here is paying attention to what's happening. And I think one of the biggest lessons I had as a business owner was, before 2008, 2009, with the Great Recession, I was hearing inklings, in probably 2007, of economists saying, this housing market's going to burst, and here are what the implications are going to be from a bigger business perspective. And I was pretty young in my entrepreneurial journey, and I was paying attention, of course, but I didn't really anticipate how that would affect business growth. So when you think strategically, you have to anticipate what things outside of your control or what's happening in the political environment or the global environment that's going to affect business growth, your client's business growth, your own career growth. You have to be able to anticipate that.
So I started working with you, Gini, as I recall, around the 2009 timeframe. So we were sort of in the middle of the throes of the
Yep.
Great Recession.
Yep.
I didn't work with you or know you before then, but could part of your problem have really stemmed from, in your professional career, you'd never really been through a recession before?
I think that, yes. I also think, I was really young in my entrepreneurial journey, like I mentioned. And, when I worked for a great big, huge global PR firm, they would, I would always have these really great reviews. But one of the things that they always told me to work on was become a strategic thinker. And I kept saying, like, what does that mean? How do I do that? I'm 27 years old. Like, explain this to me. And nobody really could. So I think it was lack of experience. I think it was being young. And I think it was, that I had never, from a business perspective, and experienced a global downturn like we had.
Well, number 2 on the list is think critically. What does that mean for you?
It's to be able to, pay attention to what's going on and actually use your brain and go, that doesn't really make sense. And I actually mentioned this in the blog post because my favorite is a photo of Abraham Lincoln with the caption, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it," which is true. I mean, this is why fake news exists today, is we have forgotten our ability to think, to use our brains, to go, oh, hang on a second. Even though that's coming from a source that I trust and I agree with, does it make sense from a bigger perspective? And I think we're all, time crunched and we have content overload and there's so much information out there. And so we're reading headlines and not really digging down deep into what's really there and what the facts are. And that's, I think as a nation, we've lost our critical thinking skills quite significantly.
Gini, I have to say, when I read that section in your blog post, I really thought about the philosophy of SpinSucks, which is tell the truth and use the truth as a positive force in your company. And I really tied your remarks in that section to the overall philosophy of that part of your company when they advise clients. Would that be a fair kind of analogy?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're certainly in a situation right now where the leader of our country does not tell the truth, and facts continue to prove that. And yet here we are. And because of that, I think there's a lack of, critical thinking and saying, okay, not only do we need to tell the truth, but we actually have to stop taking things at face value and use our brains.
Number 3 on the list was interpret, and these are obviously tied to anticipate and think critically, but it's really a little bit different. Could you explain that difference?
Yeah, it's really looking at so anticipate is really thinking about how global and political trends are going to affect you. So, a down economy, the stock market crashing, a shocking election for the White House, for the presidential campaign, whatever it happens to be, anticipate how those things will affect your career or your business. Interpret is watching the trends inside your industry. And I'll give you a really good example. Procter & Gamble has just announced that they're likely going to bring 6,000, they have 6,000 agencies, advertising, marketing, PR agencies. They're going to bring all of that work in-house. So if 6,000 agencies are going to be without business from probably the largest, if not one of the largest clients that they have, how does that affect the entire industry? And it will affect the entire industry. And it could be, that other corporations, brands follow suit and bring their agency work in-house, which means agencies are left without things to do. And, that means closing business and all those kinds of things. So how do you interpret the trends inside your industry that are happening and how it will affect you and your business growth?
Next up, I found an interesting one, which is decide. And I would not have thought that as a tool for a strategic thinker, but you certainly seem to feel it's very important. And could you explain what deciding means?
Actually making a decision. I think we tend to get there's certainly people that overanalyze, or we get analysis paralysis, especially today with all the data we have available. I mean, you can analyze data to death and it can tell a different story, depending on how you look at it. And it makes it really difficult to make a decision. So we have to be, as we go on this journey of being a strategic thinker, or building a strategic brand, or building a strategic business, that we really have to make decisions and be okay with the fact that they may not be the right decisions, but they're the right decision at the time with the information that you had. So stop overanalyzing, stop getting paralyzed with all the data that you have available, and just make the decision. And sometimes that means making a decision based on gut. I used to have a business coach that would say, obey your gut. It's always right.
So I guess my question would be one or two questions. One, when is enough in terms of data and analysis? And then two, how do you then, after you've decided, take additional information which you may come to you either in the form of data, in the form of ongoing monitoring or some information, and loop it back in to more fully inform your next decision?
Yeah, this is a really terrible answer, but it depends. I mean, it depends on what kind of data you get inside your organization. I mean, are you looking at the very basics like website traffic and Facebook number of Facebook followers and Twitter followers? Okay, so those are the basics, and you can certainly use that information. And maybe you see this weird dip in website traffic over a week's time, and you use that to go, oh, should we make a different decision? Actually, I'll give you a really good example. We have a community that you can join. It's for free, but we require, a little application just so that we know who you are and what you do, and we can sort of segment our audiences and make sure that our messaging is customized to each person, individual. And we just changed the landing page a week ago, and my team is freaking out because we haven't had as many people join as we did before we changed the landing page. And the conversation we had just this morning in our team meeting was, do we need to go back? And I was like, well, first of all, it hasn't even been a week. And second of all, the numbers while they're down, yes, the conversion rate is higher. So, you have to look at those kinds of things. And, from a strategic perspective, I don't think it's time to make that change because the data is not enough to tell us. But the team is certainly freaking out that we're not getting as many community members joining as we did before we made the change.
On the next point, once again, I would not have really thought about it in terms of how to become a better strategic thinker, but it's a line. How do you work this into your strategic thinking hat?
You have to really, stop being fearful of complete consensus. There are going to be people who don't agree with the things that you want to do or the things that you've decided to do. And unfortunately, owning a business or running a business is kind of like a dictatorship. Like, you don't have to gain complete consensus to make everybody happy. And so I think as a strategic thinker, you want to listen to all sides for sure. You want to assess the risks. You want to bring tough issues out in conversation and then figure out where the balance is. So, as we have this conversation about this landing page, I've definitely listened to everybody and, sort of freaking out about it. I'm assessing the risk right now. Am I okay to let it go another week and see what happens? Yes. It's not really a tough issue because it's something that, we're always looking at. But right now I figured out the balance is let's let it go another week or so. And see where we are, at the end of spring break. Because right now we're in March and it's spring break, and it could very well be that just people are on vacation, nobody's doing it. So I want to make sure that we're paying attention to, the trends that are happening, what's happening from a global perspective. Everybody's on vacation, and how is that aligning with what we're seeing from a data perspective?
And finally, number 6, Gini, is probably my favorite, which is learn. This is different than think critically. This is using information that you develop along the line. So why don't you explain what you meant by learn?
The only way you can truly learn, I believe, is to actually do it. And that means failing in some cases. And, we have, as human beings, we have this innate fear of failure. And that's really the only way that you can learn is if you actually do the work, and maybe you made a quick decision and it was the wrong one and you failed. And that's okay, because now you've learned a really good lesson that you can apply to the future. And one of my favorite sayings is, it doesn't matter if you fall, but in how you get up when you do. And I think that's really important for us all to remember, because we're definitely going to fall. And I don't know if you've seen this video going around Facebook where it's a little girl trying to jump from the ground to the top of her little slide, right? And it's like 3 steps up. It's not a super tall slide, but it's one of those toy plastic slides. And she keeps trying and trying and trying and trying and trying and trying. She can't get it. She keeps falling. And then she finally gets it. And I think that's really important for us all to remember, is that the only way that you're all going to get something down and be really good at it and learn is if you keep doing it.
So, Gini, let's stick on that video because it struck me, but it struck me in a different way. But it ties directly into your point. What I did not see was someone who continued to try. What I saw was a little girl who actually learned from her failures and applied those lessons. And and the learning was in, as I saw her squat down to cock up to jump, I saw her bend down further. And when that still didn't get her there, I saw her use her arms for leverage to even jump higher. And the next to last jump, when she almost made it, it seemed to me the light bulb went off in her head that if I bend down far, explode upward, at the same time I'm using my arms to drive myself, I'll be able to do this. So it was really interesting you would bring that up, but I thought she really learned from her mistakes in just terms of her technique.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And really, that's the only way you do it. We had this whole conversation in our community last week about, everybody's all up in arms about Facebook and the Cambridge Analytic data breach and all that. And, people are saying in the marketing world, do I have to be on Facebook personally if I'm going to consult clients to be there professionally? And I think the answer is yes, because you can't learn without doing those things. You just can't. You can talk theory, you can talk best practices and all that, but you really don't know what's going to work best until you do it yourself.
Well, I guess in my world, what I would have said is something along the lines of the following. It's not just having a feedback loop. It's taking the information from that feedback loop and looping it actually back in to your service, your product, or your idea.
Absolutely.
To further evolve it. So that's why I really appreciated the learn as number 6. And your example of the girl on Facebook is absolutely right.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, Gini, this has been a fascinating discussion. I've been visiting with Gini Dietrich, the founder of Arment Dietrich and SpinSucks, on her blog post, The 6 Habits That Lead to Being a Strategic Thinker in PR. But I really found the implications much broader than PR. So I'm going to commend this to everyone. Gini, I'm going to link to this blog post in the show notes and also recommend that everybody sign up for your daily newsletter because I think it's great.
And watch that video.
Okay, Gini, thanks. Until next time.
Thank you.
This is Paris Fox again. We hope you enjoyed this episode of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership with Tom Fox. If you enjoyed the show, please go to iTunes and rate the podcast. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership. If you have any questions on this podcast, you can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership, is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.